Good evening. This is Webster Tarpley speaking to you from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I'm here for the Democratic National Convention, and it's Tuesday, July 26th, 2016. Now, today is the day, of course, when the Democratic National Convention, in a roll call vote of the states, made Hillary Clinton the official nominee for president by the Democratic Party this year. And this is a fact that was pre-discounted and had been pre-discounted for a pretty long time. I don't have much to add to this. There is, of course, the aspect of something new under the sun, a woman presidential candidate of a major party, and certainly that can only be a good thing. But once we go beyond that, the controversies begin, and we'll be handling those in the coming weeks and months. But now, I would like to tell you what it looked like on the ground. In other words, if you were simply John Q. Public, right, a citizen, Joe Sixpack, whatever you want, walking in to the park, the Franklin D. Roosevelt Park in Philadelphia, where the convention was taking place. And what a strange experience this was. And I've had this experience. I'd like to tell you about it because that's what I got to see. I was not a delegate. I didn't have a press pass. I couldn't get in. I had no hope. So I went and looked at the people who were protesting. And there were quite a few people protesting. Certainly, if you are a cagey observer of the mass media, you will have noticed that there's a great desire of those corrupt corporate brainwashing media. They would like to build up a fight between Hillary and Trump that would be more or less on equal terms. I don't think this is accurate, but they try very hard. They would probably say, well, we want to show a horse race so we can get people to tune in. Fine. But I think this is not entirely accurate, because what happened in the first couple of days of this convention, Monday and Tuesday, was that every outburst, every explosion of rage and anger by these disgruntled Bernie Sanders delegates got tremendous attention. In some cases, there were more reporters reporting on these outbursts than there were actual Bernie delegates. Now, have to be specific. There were normal Bernie delegates. There are 1,900. A lot of them are normal. At the same time, they were the enraged, right, the enragés, inside the convention hall. And then there were the enraged ones outside the convention hall. So I have to tell you a little bit about the ones outside, because those are the ones that I saw. It's a kind of a covered, tree-shaded park. It's way out of the center of Philadelphia. This is not significantly appreciated. It's not that far from the Delaware River, but it's way south. In other words, if you want to go back from that to the center of town, right, to the statue of William Penn, that's a long drive. It's like 5 or 6 miles north. So here we are way down there in South Philadelphia. And as you approach, you begin to meet these people they're very strange. They're hippies. They're old hippies. These are people who are embittered, they're cynical, and they're enraged. And you can walk up to one of them, and they will start talking to you, and pretty soon they're cursing at you on the basis of absolutely nothing. It's a remarkable experience. It is a group of highly, challenged individuals. A lot of them are bohemians. A lot of them are scurrilous. I think, again, aging hippies might be about right. Now, that's not the 1900. It's not even a faction of the 1900, but it's something to bear in mind. And when you talk to them, you find that they are radical subjectivists. And of course, radical subjectivism is a bad thing to cultivate. You want to be a realist. You have to understand that there is objective reality, that the world is not a figment of your imagination, and that the lawfulness that governs the world, it doesn't start with you. You can discover it, absolutely, and you can discover it maybe better than anybody else ever has. But you're talking about something that is out there in the real world. Realism. I've always talked about realism. It's not simply just an artistic style among others, but it is the essence of art. That is realism. And radical subjectivism is something different. And what you are confronted with today, with the embittered sympathizers of Bernie Sanders, precisely in the moment when the roll call vote was going on, and their frustration and their rage and their anger was the greatest, was that most of these people, a lot of them, are incapable of situating their own personal drama, right? Their own personal Sturm und Drang in the context of something objective. When you saw Bernie Sanders address them on Monday, he got very exasperated and said, brothers and sisters, this is the world we have to live in. In other words, there is objective reality. You don't have the votes to defeat Hillary Clinton. It doesn't matter how much you scream and yell or hem and haw. The position, of course, of the Bernie delegates, right, the hardliners, was that they really wanted to get a bunch of these superdelegates to come over on their side and vote against Mrs. Clinton, but it couldn't be done. And even though every one of those decisions was also subjective, when you put them together, they create a rather significant objectivity that you can't change. Sarah Silverman, not usually a source of pearls of wisdom, in her duo there with Al Franken, also not noted for his wisdom and insight, her line was, you, Bernie or bust people, are simply ridiculous. And I'm afraid that Miss Silverman has gotten a piece of the truth. And again, I would say you have to cultivate realism, that the world doesn't depend on your emotions. The world is not organized to satisfy your needs, wants, desires, concerns. The world does not address your concerns unless you make it do so. Now, what else can we say? These people have cultivated a great deal of bitterness. A couple of things I saw as they were leaving, right? This is as they're walking out, at the nadir of their despair, walking through this park, and I say out, they were never in the convention center. They were in a kind of a protest area where some kind of a public address system had been rigged up so they could hear it, right? One of them had a sign saying, America was never great. So that's their way of being against Trump and also against Mrs. Clinton. America was never great. So these people are bitter cynics, and I'm afraid, quite frankly, that their cynicism and bitterness has gotten the upper hand over reality, because obviously there have been aspects of greatness in American history, right? There have been lights and shadows, greatness and limits, sure. A mixed bag, which is pretty much what you find everywhere. Not all dark, though. Another one on the way out said, secessionism comes next. He said it more or less under his breath. I don't know if he was expecting to be heard by anybody, but I heard it. Secessionism comes next. Now, that is pretty ugly snuff. Plato warns us about the plebs, about the mob. We know from Roman history, the city mob is a destructive force, most likely going to be manipulated by oligarchs and other sinister forces. And with Machiavelli, it's the same thing. The oligarchs act to secure the interest of oligarchs, and they're not going to change that much. So that's what I saw. And again, it was not pretty. And secessionism is the last thing you want to even consider. I'd like to warn that given this mentality, some of these people might be recruitable for the next round of destabilization, which would be, if Trump ever gets elected, by the autumn to winter at the end of 2017, there will emerge a market for a constitutional convention, which would be a kind of witches' Sabbath of destabilization and other horrors, carried out precisely by gutter snipes, cynics, profiteers, cranks, kooks, nutcases, and what have you. So you have to understand that a lot of the anarchist and aging hippie population has somehow collected itself into the Bernie Sanders campaign. And again, this is not, it's not a pretty thing. It's not going to be good. Other than that, what we had tonight was Bill Clinton. And Bill Clinton, I suppose we can give him credit for loyalty. Bill Clinton was there to attempt to humanize Hillary Rodham Clinton, that she's not a witch, that she's not an ogre, that she has human qualities, that she has emotions, that she sometimes even shows them. So Bill was there trying to present his wife in the best possible light, which once Trump comes on the scene is actually an understandable enterprise. Now, he talked a lot about good deeds by Mrs. Clinton, and I'm afraid that he left some things out. He generally left out the time from 1997, 1998, 1999, and those were, of course, the months of the impeachment crisis, right, when the Republicans went bonkers and tried to impeach Clinton. And we have already covered the story mentioned in a book called The Pact, about a secret deal between Bill Clinton and the Speaker of the House then, outgoing, I suppose, by this time, Newt Gingrich, which was that they were going to get together and do what would have been called a grand bargain of deadly austerity and shredding of the rights of senior citizens and many others. And they would have gone through with this, except that into the middle of this secret exchange of views waltzed Mademoiselle Lewinsky, who then caused this upheaval where the Republican members of Congress essentially went bonkers and wouldn't be seen ever talking to Clinton or associating him in any way. Associating with him, of course. So that didn't get any attention. But again, it was supposed to be all about the good deeds of Hillary. Unfortunately, in addition to this impeachment question, which, again, I think Clinton is probably more sinned against than sinning, you have some ones when it's some of these moments when it's not clearly not that way. The three really big bad things with Clinton are, first of all, that he abolished welfare as we had known it. In other words, part of the Social Security Act of 1935 provided, in addition to old age pensions and unemployment benefits, it provided aid to families with dependent children, i.e. welfare. And Clinton, cynically and indeed needlessly, destroyed it in order to neutralize the Republican opposition to his reelection in the year 1996. And then, beyond that, you've got the deregulation of derivatives. That came in 2000. All derivatives were deregulated, and essentially we were then on track for the Lehman Brothers crisis, the Bear Stearns Lehman Brothers crisis of derivatives in 2007, 2008. And the third big bad thing that they did was the giant sucking sound. It was NAFTA and the massive exporting of jobs to foreign sweatshops, runaway shops, and a tremendous, massive loss of U.S. employment. So those three things, right? NAFTA and the abolition of Social Security, practically, and this other measure that we just talked about. That's what Clinton did, and this was very bad and very ugly, and somehow he forgot to mention it. Now, this you don't have to decide how you're going to vote based on that, but you should be aware of it. Otherwise, what Clinton was obviously trying to do was to humanize Hillary. He wanted Hillary to seem to be humanized, not demonized. He wanted her to be somebody with emotions who was not afraid to show them, and so forth. So it may have been a success. I don't know. And again, once you have Trump as the alternative, things begin to look a little bit different. Other than that, I think a lot of the commentators are still chewing on this question of the darkness, right? The horror, the heart of darkness in the Republican convention, and in particular in the Thursday night speech by Donald Trump. Red-faced, apoplectic, enraged, off the charts, bonkers. And remember, it is the transition from the direct apologetic to the indirect. Once again, the direct apologetic is the boosterism and sloganeering of the Chamber of Commerce, where they say, we're making progress in all fields. We probably don't have any problems left. And if we do have any, they're in the process of being solved even as we speak. So it's a very banal, flat, optimistic, but it's optimism of an almost infantile quality. But when you make the transition into the indirect apologetic, you can see that things are already much worse. Because again, the indirect apologetic doesn't seek to deny terrible problems and an awful human condition, but it tries to portray these as immutable, permanent, eternal qualities of the human condition. Those problems will always be there. The only thing you can hope for at most is that you're going to get a man on horseback, a dictator, a Napoleon, a Caesar, a Hitler to come in and fix them. So that's essentially what we've done. We've made the transition from the direct apologetic, which is that of every Chamber of Commerce across this great land, into the world of the indirect apologetic. Schopenhauer, Nietzsche, and above all, the fascists, the Nazis, and people like that who start from pessimism and despair, and they try to build a political project inside such a world. And it's very different in the United States, right? In Europe, you've had governments on and off for 100 years who have gone and dabbled in the indirect apologetic. But here, not so much, right? We've usually had this sort of flat, bland, Philistine apologetic, right? Things are fine. You've never had it so good. And all the rest of that. That's the direct apologetic, especially when it's a big lie. So that's the transition that we've made. So tonight, we've had Bill Clinton, and we have to see what's coming up. And we're watching polls that show a convention bounce for Trump, but a modest one, and perhaps even a modest one that is already in the process of flowing back out to sea after reaching a high tide somewhere over this past weekend. So, from Philadelphia, this is Webster Tarpley reporting. It's the late evening now, almost midnight of, now we're into the morning of Wednesday, but and when we started this, it was the evening, the late night of Tuesday, the 26th of July, 2016. This is Webster Tarpley. Thank you very much, and we'll see you tomorrow.